The gunshot echoed across the valley just as Benjamin Tucker stepped onto his front porch with his morning coffee. And for a moment, he thought someone was hunting on his land, until he saw the figure dart through his garden with movements quick and desperate as a cornered fox. He set down his cup and reached for the rifle beside the door, not out of aggression but caution, because in the summer of 1882 in Northern California, you never knew what trouble might find its way to your doorstep. The Ukiah Valley stretched wide and beautiful around his ranch, golden hills rolling toward distant mountains, but beauty did not mean safety. He had learned that lesson the hard way over his 32 years, the last 5 of which he had spent alone on this land, tending cattle and watching seasons pass with only his horses and his own bitter thoughts for company. The figure moved through his vegetable garden with purpose, despite the obvious fear. And as Benjamin approached with his rifle lowered, he realized it was a woman. She crouched between the tomato plants he had neglected all summer, her hands working soil with practiced efficiency, planting something from a small cloth bag at her waist. Her dress was torn and dusty, dark hair falling loose from what had once been a braid, and when she heard his boots on the hard, packed earth, she spun around with eyes wide and wild. "Please," she said, breathless, hands still clutching dirt and seeds. "Please, I just need a moment. They are coming." Benjamin scanned the horizon, saw dust rising from the road that led to his property. 3 riders moving fast. His jaw tightened. He had wanted nothing more than to be left alone, had built this life specifically to avoid other people and their endless complications, but something about the terror in her eyes and the dirt under her fingernails made him step between her and the approaching riders. "Get inside," he said quietly. "Through that door. There is a root cellar beneath the kitchen. Hide there until I come for you." She hesitated only a heartbeat before gathering her bag and running. He watched her disappear into his house, then turned to face the riders, his rifle now held with clear intent across his chest. The men who arrived moments later were exactly the type Benjamin had expected. Hard faces, harder eyes, the kind of men who wore their cruelty like badges of honor. The one in front had a deputy star pinned to his vest, which somehow made it worse. "Morning," the deputy said, reining his horse to a stop. His companions flanked him, hands resting on their gun belts. "We are looking for a woman. Runaway. Seen anyone pass through here?" "This is private property," Benjamin said evenly. "And no, I have seen no one." The deputy's eyes narrowed. "You mind if we look around? She is dangerous, stole from her employer." "I mind very much," Benjamin replied. "And I said no one has passed through here. My land, my word. You can take it or you can try to make trouble, but I guarantee you will not like how that turns out." The 3 men exchanged glances. Benjamin had a reputation in these parts, had earned it in the years before he became a rancher, back when he wore a different kind of life. The deputy seemed to remember this, seemed to calculate odds and find them unfavorable. "If you see her," the deputy said slowly, "you let the law know. Name is Dalton, Miss Vivienne Dalton, property of the Ashford household down in Hopland, reward for her return." Benjamin said nothing, just stood there until the men turned their horses and rode away, dust trailing behind them like dirty conscience. He waited until they disappeared over the ridge before returning to his house, his coffee cold and forgotten on the porch. He found her in the root cellar as instructed, pressed against the far wall among barrels of potatoes and preserved goods. In the lamplight, he could see her more clearly. She was young, perhaps 23 or 24, with dark eyes that held both fear and defiance in equal measure. Her hand still gripped her seed bag like a lifeline. "They are gone," he said from the cellar doorway, "but they called you property. I need to know what I have just involved myself in." She lifted her chin. "My name is Vivienne, not property, a person. And what I stole was myself, which cannot be theft because a person cannot steal what already belongs to them. They said Dalton, said you were from the Ashford household. Dalton was my mother's name. I never took theirs, not in my heart, though they put it in their ledgers. After my mother died, they said I owed them. Indentured, they called it. Said she had borrowed money for medicine for doctors and I would work until it was repaid. That was 7 years ago. I was 17. The debt only ever grew, never shrank, no matter how hard I worked." Benjamin understood immediately. He had heard of such arrangements, legal slavery dressed in different words, contracts written to trap rather than free. His stomach turned with familiar disgust at how people twisted law to justify cruelty. And the gunshot I heard, warning shot. I ran when they were changing shifts. I knew this road led north, toward real towns, places where I might disappear. I saw your garden from the road, saw it was struggling, and I thought. She looked down at her seed bag. I know it is strange, but I thought if I planted something, if I left something growing, then even if they caught me, at least I would have done one thing they did not control. One thing that was my choice. The explanation was so unexpected, so quietly desperate, that Benjamin felt something crack in the walls he had built around himself. He recognized that need to leave a mark, to matter, to create when the world seemed determined to destroy. "What were you planting?" he asked. "Lettuce. Carrots. Some herbs my mother taught me about. Your soil is good, but the garden is dying. I could see that even from the road." She met his eyes. "I know you do not know me. I know you have no reason to help. But if you could just let me stay until dark, I could slip away then, follow the creek north toward Ukiah proper. They would not find me in town, not with all the people." Benjamin considered this. Considered the smart thing, which would be to send her on her way immediately, to wash his hands of the whole situation. He had come here to be alone, to escape complications and connections. He had lost too much already in his life, had buried a wife and an infant daughter 8 years ago, had walked away from everything that reminded him of them because the pain was too enormous to contain. But he looked at this woman who had stopped mid-flight to plant seeds in a stranger's neglected garden, and he thought about his Sarah, who had loved growing things, who had dreamed of a garden full of vegetables and flowers and herbs. The garden he had let die after she was gone because he could not bear to tend it without her. "You can stay," he said. "Not just until dark, until it is actually safe. They will be watching the roads for a few days at least, and you will be easy to spot alone. Give it a week, maybe 2. You can help with the ranch work if you want to feel useful, but I am not asking for payment. I am offering safety, nothing more." Vivienne stared at him as though he had spoken a foreign language. "Why would you do this?" "You do not know me." "No," Benjamin agreed. "But I know men like those who were chasing you, and that is reason enough." She followed him up from the cellar on shaking legs, and he showed her to the spare room that had not been used in years. It was dusty but serviceable, with a bed and a window that looked out over the valley. He brought her water for washing, found some of his cleaner clothes that she could belt tight to make fit, and left her to rest while he went about his daily work with the cattle. But he found himself distracted all morning, his mind returning again and again to the woman in his house. He had meant what he said about offering safety with no expectations, but he had not considered how strange it would be to have another person present in the space he had claimed as his solitude. The house felt different already, as though her presence had shifted something fundamental in the air. When he returned at midday, he found her in the garden. She had changed into his borrowed clothes, the shirt and pants rolled and cinched to fit her smaller frame, and she was on her knees in the dirt, working with intense focus. She had already cleared weeks of weeds from around the struggling tomato plants and was now working on a section that had gone completely wild. "You should be resting," he called out. She looked up, and for the first time he saw her without the immediate terror, saw the way her whole face changed when she smiled. "I cannot rest. I have been trapped indoors doing laundry and cooking and cleaning for 7 years. Let me be outside. Let me do this." Benjamin approached, watched her capable hands sort weeds from vegetables, saw how she tested the soil and examined the leaves with practiced knowledge. "Your mother taught you gardening. Everything. She was from Mexico originally, came north with her family when she was young. She knew plants, knew the earth. She could make anything grow." Vivienne's voice softened with memory. "She used to say that you could tell everything about a person by how they treated their garden, whether they listened to what it needed or just demanded what they wanted from it." "And what does my garden tell you about me?" She sat back on her heels, considering. "That you planted it with love once. The placement is too thoughtful otherwise. But that something happened and you stopped being able to see it. The plants are not dead, just neglected. They are still trying. They are still reaching for sun and making fruit. They just need someone to notice them again." The accuracy of this observation struck Benjamin like a physical blow. He had planted this garden with Sarah, had spent hours discussing where each vegetable should go, which herbs would help which plants, how to arrange everything for maximum beauty and utility. And after she died, he had looked at it and seen only absence, only the ghost of her kneeling in the dirt with soil on her cheek and joy in her eyes. "I will leave you to it then," he managed, and retreated before she could see how her words had affected him. That evening he made dinner, simple fare of beans and bacon and cornbread, and they ate together at his small table in a silence that was not quite comfortable but not hostile either. Vivienne kept glancing at him as though trying to solve a puzzle, and Benjamin kept his eyes mostly on his plate, uncertain how to navigate this strange new dynamic. "May I ask you something?" she said finally. "Why do you live out here alone? This ranch is clearly built for more than one person." Benjamin set down his fork. He could refuse to answer, could retreat behind privacy and coldness. But something about her directness, her courage in asking, made him want to offer truth in return. "I had a wife, Sarah. We built this place together, planned to fill it with children and life. But she died giving birth to our daughter. The baby died too. That was 8 years ago. I stayed in town for a while after, working as a lawman, but everything there reminded me of them. So I came here, to the land we had bought together, and I have been here since." Vivienne's expression filled with such genuine compassion that Benjamin had to look away. "I am sorry, truly. That is a grief too large for words. It is what it is. I have made my peace with solitude." "Have you?" she asked it gently, not as challenge but as real question. "Because I think if you had truly made peace with being alone, you would not have helped me. You would not have risked trouble for a stranger." He had no answer to that, so he cleared the dishes instead, and they spent the rest of the evening in separate corners of the house, each pretending to be absorbed in their own activities. But that night, lying in his bed, Benjamin listened to the unfamiliar sounds of another person in his home. The creak of floorboards as she moved in the spare room, the soft sound of the window opening to let in night air, and he realized she was right. If he had truly wanted to be alone, he would have turned her away. Something in him had reached toward her presence like those neglected plants reaching toward sun. The next morning, he found her already in the garden at dawn, working in the cool morning air. She had brought water from the pump and was carefully irrigating the plants, talking to them softly in Spanish as she worked. Benjamin stood on the porch with his coffee, watching her, and felt something unfurl in his chest that he had thought long dead. Over the following days, they fell into an unexpected rhythm. Benjamin worked the ranch, tending his small herd of cattle, mending fences, maintaining equipment. Vivienne transformed the garden, bringing it back to life with patient, knowledgeable care. She planted the seeds she had brought, started others from the stores in his root cellar, pruned and watered and weeded until the whole plot began to look purposeful again instead of abandoned. But more than that, she began to plant other things. She found wildflowers growing at the edges of his property and transplanted them to create borders of color. She started herbs in old tin cans on the sunny kitchen windowsill. She took cuttings from the roses that grew wild near the creek and coaxed them to root, then planted them near the house. "You are supposed to be hiding," Benjamin said one afternoon, finding her up to her elbows in a new flower bed, "not putting down roots." She looked up at him, shading her eyes against the sun. "Can it not be both? Besides, you said a week or two, that is time enough to plant. And if I leave, you will have flowers to remember that someone was here, that someone cared about this place." "I care about this place. I know you do. But you have been punishing it for your grief. These plants, this land, they did not take your wife from you. They were her dream too. Letting them die does not honor her memory. Letting them live does." Benjamin wanted to be angry at this presumption, this analysis from a woman who had known him barely a week. But the truth in her words diffused his defensiveness. He thought about Sarah, really thought about her for the first time in years instead of just flinching away from the pain. She would have hated what he had done to the garden. She would have been furious to see him waste the land they had chosen together. "She would have liked you," he said quietly. Sarah. She had that same way of talking to plants like they could hear her. Vivienne's smile was soft and sad. "I wish I could have known her. I think I would have liked her too." That evening, for the first time, they sat together on the porch after dinner, watching the sun set over the valley in streaks of orange and gold. The air smelled like dust and distant rain, and the herbs Vivienne had been working with earlier. Benjamin found himself talking more than he had in years, telling stories about the ranch, about the early days with Sarah, about his life before. "I was a Texas Ranger for a while," he said. "Back before I married. Saw some hard things, did some hard things. When I met Sarah, she told me I could either stay that person or choose to become someone new, so I chose her, chose this life, chose to build instead of destroy." "That was brave," Vivienne said. "Choosing to change, or cowardly, running from violence instead of facing it." "No. Running from violence is not cowardice. It is wisdom. The world has enough violence. It needs more people brave enough to choose gentleness instead." She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapped her arms around them. "That is what my mother used to say. That the real rebels are the ones who plant gardens in the middle of hard places, who insist on creating beauty even when the world demands ugliness." Benjamin looked at her profile in the fading light, the determined set of her jaw, the way her eyes reflected the sunset. He realized with sudden clarity that she was extraordinarily beautiful, not in a delicate way but in the way of things that had survived storms and grown stronger for it. "Will you tell me about her?" he asked. "Your mother." And Vivienne did, her voice soft but steady, painting a picture of a woman who had loved fiercely and taught carefully and died too young from an illness that money could have treated. She told him about learning to identify plants in the hills, about making medicines and cooking with wild herbs, about the songs her mother sang while working. "She taught me that everything you plant is an act of hope," Vivienne said. "Because you are putting something small and vulnerable into the earth and trusting it will grow into something strong. You are betting on the future, on life continuing, on there being a harvest. That is faith, in the realist sense. Benjamin thought about this long after they had gone inside for the night, lying awake and listening to the house settle. Hope, faith, a bet on the future. He had stopped allowing himself those things after Sarah died, had closed himself off from anything that required believing in tomorrow. But Vivienne had walked into his life planting seeds everywhere she went, literally and metaphorically, and he could feel something starting to grow in him whether he was ready for it or not. A week passed, then another. The men did not return. Benjamin rode into Ukiah and heard rumors that the Ashford household had given up the search, written off their loss, and found some other poor soul to exploit. He should have told Vivienne then that it was safe to leave, that she could move on to wherever she had been headed. But he could not quite form the words. Instead, he found himself making excuses. The roads were not safe yet. Better to wait another week. The garden needed her. He needed help with the upcoming cattle drive. All lies, or at least all partial truths masking the real truth, which was that he did not want her to leave. The house felt alive again with her in it. She sang while she worked, old songs in Spanish and English. She cooked meals with the vegetables from the garden and wild greens she foraged from the hills. She rearranged his furniture to catch better light, sewed curtains from old fabric she found in his storage chest, placed jars of wildflowers on every surface. And she talked to him, really talked, asking questions and listening to answers and sharing her own thoughts on everything from politics to philosophy, to whether tomatoes tasted better when you picked them still warm from the sun. Benjamin, who had spent 5 years speaking only to cattle and horses, found himself coming alive in those conversations, remembering that he had once enjoyed ideas and debates and the simple pleasure of human connection. But more troubling were the other feelings starting to surface. The way his heart sped up when he saw her in the morning, the way he noticed the curve of her neck when she bent over the garden, the way her laugh seemed to brighten the whole valley, the way he caught himself watching her hands move through soil and imagining those same hands touching his face, his chest, his scars both visible and hidden. He fought these feelings viciously at first. It felt like a betrayal of Sarah, like he was trying to replace something irreplaceable. And beyond that, Vivienne had come to him for safety, for refuge. She trusted him. Taking advantage of that trust, allowing his attraction to color his actions, would make him no better than the men she had fled, so he tried to create distance, started taking longer rides with the cattle, ate dinner quickly, and retreated to work on his accounts, spoke in brief sentences instead of the long conversations they had been sharing. Vivienne noticed. Of course she did. After 3 days of his withdrawal, she confronted him while he was mending a fence far from the house, as though he could outrun the situation by staying busy. "Have I done something to offend you?" she asked without preamble, standing on the other side of the fence with her arms crossed. "No. Just busy with ranch work." "You are lying. You have been avoiding me. If you want me to leave, just say so. I will not force my presence where it is not wanted." Benjamin drove the fence post harder than necessary, fighting for control. "It is not that." "Then what?" He could not tell her. Could not explain the tangle of guilt and desire and fear that was choking him. So he said nothing, just kept working, hoping she would give up and leave him to his cowardice. Instead, she walked around the fence and stood directly in front of him, forcing him to acknowledge her. Her eyes blazed with frustration and hurt. "I thought we were becoming friends," she said. "I thought you understood that I am not some fragile thing that needs to be handled with silence. If I have overstayed my welcome, tell me. If I have misread this situation, tell me. But do not shut me out without explanation. I have had enough of being treated like I do not deserve honesty." The The passion in her voice broke through Benjamin's defenses. He set down his tools and met her eyes, really met them, and knew he owed her truth even if it cost him. You have not overstayed anything. You have not done anything wrong. The problem is me. The problem is that I am starting to feel things I have no right to feel, and I am trying to protect you from my own selfishness. Vivienne blinked, surprise replacing anger. What things? Benjamin laughed bitterly. You really want me to spell it out? Fine. I like you, Vivienne. More than like you, I think about you constantly. I look for excuses to be near you. I care what you think, what you feel, whether you are happy. And it is wrong because you came here seeking safety, not romance. You trusted me, and I am betraying that trust by wanting more than I should. The silence that followed was excruciating. Vivienne stared at him, her expression unreadable, and Benjamin waited for her disgust, her rejection, her decision to leave immediately despite any danger. Instead, she started to laugh. Not cruel laughter, but something bright and disbelieving and edged with its own emotion. You fool, she said. You absolute fool. I have been falling in love with you for weeks. Why do you think I keep planting things? Why do you think I have not asked to leave even though we both know it is safe now? I am putting down roots because I want to stay. Because I look at this ranch and this valley and you, and I think this could be home if you wanted me here. Benjamin felt like the earth had shifted beneath him. You? What? I love you, Vivienne said simply. I did not mean to, I was not looking for it. But working beside you every day, learning who you are, watching you be gentle with frightened cattle and patient with struggling plants, seeing the way you try so hard to be good even when it costs you. How could I not love that? How could I not love you? Benjamin closed the distance between them without conscious decision, his hands coming up to frame her face, thumbs brushing her cheeks. Say it again. I love you, Benjamin Tucker. I love your sad eyes and your kind hands and the way you listen when I talk about my mother. I love that you saved me without asking for anything in return. I love that you let me be free here, that you see me as a person instead of property. I love you, and I want to stay if you will have me. He kissed her then, finally, inevitably, and it felt like coming home and starting over and healing all at once. She made a soft sound against his mouth, and her hands fisted in his shirt and pulled him closer. And Benjamin thought his heart might actually burst from the magnitude of what he was feeling. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers and tried to find words adequate to the moment. I love you too, he managed. I tried not to, tried to fight it. But Vivienne, you walked into my life and started planting hope everywhere, and I could not resist it. Could not resist you. The garden is alive again, and so am I, and it is all because of you. She kissed him again, softer this time, tender and full of promise. Then let me stay. Let me plant more things. Let me love you in this place and build a life here. We have both survived enough darkness. Let us choose light now. Let us choose each other. Yes, Benjamin said, and then again, yes, stay, please stay. They stood there in the afternoon sun, holding each other like lifelines, and Benjamin felt the last walls around his heart crumble completely. He had thought his life was over after Sarah died, that he was simply going through motions until his own end. But Vivienne had shown him that you could grieve what you lost and still choose to live, that honoring the past did not mean refusing the future, that love did not come only once if you were brave enough to open yourself to it again. Over the following weeks, everything changed and nothing changed. They still worked the ranch together, still tended the garden, still sat on the porch watching sunsets. But now there was touch woven through it all. Benjamin's hand on her waist as he passed behind her in the kitchen. Vivienne's fingers trailing through his hair as they talked in the evenings. Kisses stolen throughout the day, sweet and heated and full of joy. They talked about everything now, with the last barriers removed. Benjamin told her about his fears, about the guilt he carried for being happy again, about his worry that loving her somehow diminished what he had felt for Sarah. Vivienne listened and held him, and told him that the heart did not work like that, that love was not a finite resource that got used up, that Sarah would want him to live fully rather than die slowly of loneliness. "My mother told me once," Vivienne said, "that grief and love are two sides of the same coin. You grieve because you loved. But that means you know how to love, that you have the capacity for it. Denying yourself love again does not honor what you lost. It just wastes what you still have to give." Benjamin kissed her temple, her cheek, her mouth. "You are very wise. No, just loved by a wise woman, and trying to love you as well as she loved me." They worked together to fully restore the ranch to what it had been in Benjamin's dreams with Sarah. The garden expanded, bursting with vegetables and flowers and herbs. They repaired the barn, painted the house, mended every fence and gate. Vivienne had ideas for everything, visions of orchards and berry patches and a greenhouse for starting seeds early. Benjamin found himself caught up in her enthusiasm, planning years into the future for the first time since he had lost his family. When autumn came, bringing cooler nights and harvest time, Benjamin took Vivienne into Ukiah to purchase supplies and to make something official. They stopped at the small church on the edge of town, where the minister was a kind man who asked no uncomfortable questions about where Vivienne had come from or why she carried no identification papers. "We want to marry," Benjamin said simply. "As soon as possible." The minister smiled. "I will need witnesses and a week to post the banns." "Skip the banns. I will pay extra. We have witnesses here." Benjamin gestured to two townspeople he knew vaguely, a shopkeeper and his wife. "I am not a young man waiting to start life. I know what I want. I want to marry this woman today." Vivienne squeezed his hand, her eyes bright. The minister looked between them, seemed to see the certainty there, and nodded. "Very well. If these good people will stand witness, we can proceed." It was a simple ceremony, 5 minutes of words spoken in a plain chapel, but when Benjamin slipped the ring onto Vivienne's finger, a simple gold band he had bought from the general store, he felt the weight and significance of the promise. This was his wife. This woman who had appeared in his garden like an answer to a prayer he had not known how to speak. This woman who had planted hope in his empty life and loved him back to living. "I love you," he whispered as they walked out into the autumn sunshine, newly married, newly joined. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret staying." "I could never regret this," Vivienne said. "You gave me freedom and home and love. You gave me everything I needed and things I did not even know I wanted. I will tend this life we are building together as carefully as I tend the garden. I promise you that." They returned to the ranch as husband and wife, and if the wedding night was tender and awkward and beautiful in equal measure, it was theirs alone to treasure. Benjamin learned the map of Vivienne's body, the scars from her years of hard labor, the strength in her frame, the softness where she was soft. And she learned him, the old bullet wound in his shoulder from his ranger days, the calluses on his hands from ranch work, the way he touched her like she was precious and fragile and fierce all at once. Afterwards, lying tangled together in the bed that had been so lonely for so long, Benjamin stared at the ceiling and tried to comprehend how thoroughly his life had transformed. "What are you thinking?" Vivienne asked, her head on his chest, her fingers tracing idle patterns on his skin. "That I am the luckiest man alive. That I do not deserve you, but I am going to try my damnedest to be worthy of you anyway. You already are worthy. You were worthy the moment you stepped between me and those men. Everything since has just been confirmation." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and Benjamin dreamed of gardens and children and growing old with dirt under his nails and love in his heart. The seasons turned. Winter came cold and clear, and they spent evenings by the fire, planning the spring planting, talking about expanding the herd, discussing the future with the ease of people who believed they had one together. Benjamin taught Vivienne to ride properly, and she proved a quick study, soon accompanying him on checks of the fence line and cattle. She taught him the plant lore her mother had passed down, which herbs helped with what ailments, how to make tinctures and teas and poultices. Snow blanketed the valley, and they woke to frost on the windows and their breath misting in the cold bedroom. They stayed close, kept each other warm, existed in a bubble of happiness that felt almost dangerous in its intensity. Benjamin kept waiting for something to shatter it, for the men to come back, for some disaster to strike, for the universe to decide he had been happy enough and now must pay. But nothing happened. The world left them alone. Spring came early, and Vivienne was out in the garden the moment the ground thawed, planting the seeds she had saved from last year's harvest, starting new beds, pruning the roses that had survived the winter. Benjamin watched her from the porch one morning, coffee in hand, and felt a wave of such profound gratitude that it almost knocked him over. She noticed him watching and waved, her smile brighter than the spring sun. He set down his coffee and went to join her, kneeling in the dirt beside her, taking up a trowel. "What can I do?" he asked. "Just be here," she said. "Just plant with me. That is enough." So they planted together, side by side in the warming earth. And if anyone had asked Benjamin Tucker at that moment whether he believed in second chances, he would have pointed to the woman beside him and the green things growing all around them, and said that he had all the proof he needed. By summer, Vivienne suspected she was pregnant, though she said nothing at first, not wanting to raise hopes that might be dashed. But when the signs became unmistakable, when she woke 3 mornings in a row feeling ill and her courses did not come, she told Benjamin over breakfast, her voice shaking slightly with nerves and excitement. Benjamin froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. "You are certain?" "As certain as I can be without a doctor. But yes, I think so. I think we are going to have a baby." The fork clattered to his plate. For a moment, Vivienne feared she had made a terrible mistake, that the reminder of what he had lost would undo all the healing. But then Benjamin stood and came around the table and pulled her into his arms with such fierce tenderness that she felt tears spring to her eyes. "A baby," he said into her hair. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy? I know this must bring up difficult memories." Benjamin pulled back to look at her, cupping her face in his hands. "I am terrified. I would be lying if I said otherwise. But Vivienne, I am so happy I can barely breathe. This is not replacing what I lost. This is new. This is ours. This is life continuing, which is exactly what you told me was possible if I was brave enough to let it." She kissed him then, tasting salt from tears she had not realized were falling. "We will be brave together, and this baby will be so loved, so wanted. Whatever happens, that will always be true." Benjamin rode into Ukiah that afternoon and returned with the doctor, a gruff but kind man who examined Vivienne and confirmed what she already knew. She was perhaps 2 months along, healthy, showing all the right signs. The baby would come in the winter, probably January if his calculations were correct. "You take care of her," the doctor told Benjamin. "No heavy lifting, plenty of rest, good food, and send for me if anything seems wrong." "I will wrap her in cotton wool if she lets me," Benjamin replied, and Vivienne rolled her eyes but was secretly pleased by his obvious concern. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into fall. Vivienne's belly swelled, and she moved through the ranch with that particular grace of women carrying life. She still worked the garden, though Benjamin limited her to light tasks and hovered constantly until she threatened to hit him with a trowel. The vegetables came in thick and abundant, and they spent long days preserving and storing, preparing for the winter and the baby that would arrive with it. They converted the room that had been Vivienne's into a nursery, painting it sunny yellow and building a cradle from oak Benjamin cut from their own land. Vivienne sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her hands moving with patient skill. Benjamin watched her sometimes, overwhelmed by the reality of what was coming, the responsibility and the joy of it. "I am scared," he admitted one evening as they sat in the nursery, Vivienne in the rocking chair he had built, Benjamin on the floor at her feet. "I am scared something will go wrong like it did before." Vivienne ran her fingers through his hair. "I am scared too, but we cannot let fear steal our joy. Whatever happens, we face it together. And Benjamin, I am strong. I am young and healthy, and I know my own body. I will do everything right. I promise." "I know you will. I trust you. He pressed his face against her knee. "I cannot lose you. I would not survive it. You will not lose me. I am staying. I am here. I have planted too many roots to leave now." When the first snow fell in late December, Vivienne was huge and uncomfortable and counting days. The baby had dropped low, and the doctor had checked her just the week before, pronouncing everything ready. "It would be soon," he said. "Be prepared." The labor started on a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks into January, with the valley locked in winter cold. Vivienne woke Benjamin before dawn, her face calm but her eyes intense. "It is time," she said simply. Benjamin was up immediately, pulling on clothes, building up the fire, sending one of the ranch hands he had hired for winter help to fetch the doctor. Vivienne moved through the house, gathering things she had prepared, breathing through the early contractions with focus. "How are you so calm?" Benjamin asked, hovering uselessly. "Because panic would not help, and because I have faith that my body knows what to do." She winced through another contraction, leaning on the kitchen table. "Though I admit it would be nice if it knew how to do it painlessly." The doctor arrived within the hour, his bag in hand, his manner brisk and efficient. He examined Vivienne and nodded. "This will be a while yet. First babies take their time. You should rest while you can." But Vivienne did not want to rest. She wanted to walk, to move, to labor on her feet as her mother had taught her was best. So Benjamin walked with her, around and around the house, supporting her weight when contractions hit, murmuring encouragement and love. The labor progressed through the morning and into afternoon. It was hard work, painful work, and there were moments when Vivienne's composure cracked and she cried out or wept or cursed the entire situation. Benjamin felt helpless, able to do nothing but be present, hold her hand, bring water, wipe sweat from her face. "I am here," he kept saying. "You are doing so well. I love you. I am here." As evening fell and the light faded, the doctor finally pronounced her ready to push. They had prepared the bedroom, and Vivienne climbed onto the bed with Benjamin supporting her back, and began the final hard work of bringing their child into the world. Benjamin had thought watching Sarah die in childbirth was the worst experience of his life, but he realized now that watching Vivienne labor, seeing her in pain and knowing he could do nothing to ease it, was its own special torture. But this time was different. This time the doctor seemed confident. This time Vivienne was strong and determined and fighting with everything she had. When the baby finally emerged, slippery and screaming, into the winter night, Benjamin felt his heart stop and restart in the space of a breath. "A boy," the doctor announced, holding up the infant. "You have a son." The baby wailed lustily, strong and angry at being thrust into cold air. The doctor cleaned him quickly and wrapped him and placed him on Vivienne's chest, and she looked down at the tiny red face with such pure love that Benjamin felt tears stream down his face unchecked. "We have a son," Vivienne said wonderingly. "Benjamin, we have a son." Benjamin could not speak, could only nod and press kisses to Vivienne's sweaty forehead and stare at the baby with awe. His son. Their son. Alive and healthy and perfect. The doctor finished his work, pronounced both mother and child doing well, accepted payment and congratulations, and left them alone with instructions to send for him if any problems arose. But Benjamin hardly heard him, too focused on Vivienne and the baby. "What should we name him?" Vivienne asked, her voice exhausted but happy. Benjamin thought about his own father, a hard man he had not been close to. Thought about suggesting Sarah's father's name as a way of honoring his first wife. But then he looked at this new tiny person and knew they needed to name him for himself, for his own future, not for the past. "What about Samuel?" Benjamin suggested. "It means God has heard or asked of God, and it feels right, like we asked for this chance and it was given." Vivienne smiled. "Samuel Tucker. Yes, I like that. Samuel it is." Baby Samuel nursed and slept, and Vivienne slept too, exhausted from her labor. Benjamin held his son for the first time, properly held him, and felt the weight of responsibility and love settle onto his shoulders like a physical thing. This child depended on him. This child would look to him for protection and teaching and love. It was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. "I promise to be a good father," he whispered to the sleeping infant. "I promise to teach you to be strong and kind. I promise to love your mother and show you what a good marriage looks like. I promise to be here, always, for as long as I am able." The baby slept on, oblivious, and Benjamin held him and watched over both his wife and son through the long winter night. The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and tiny milestones and overwhelming love. Samuel was a good baby, healthy and growing fast. Vivienne recovered well from the birth, and soon was back to working in the garden, though with the baby strapped to her in a sling her mother had taught her to make. Benjamin had never imagined he could be this happy. Watching Vivienne sing to Samuel while she planted seeds, watching her nurse him in the rocking chair, watching her face light up when the baby smiled. And Samuel himself, who looked more like Benjamin every day, with his dark hair and serious eyes, but who had Vivienne's temperament, curious and calm and quick to smile. By the time Samuel was 6 months old, sitting up and starting to babble, the garden was in full bloom again. Vivienne had expanded it even further, creating dedicated sections for different types of plants. Medicinal herbs in one area, vegetables in another, flowers everywhere else. She had grafted fruit trees and started berry bushes and talked constantly about her plans for the future. "I want to teach Samuel all of this," she told Benjamin one evening as they sat on the porch, the baby between them, reaching for everything within his limited grasp. "I want him to know the earth, to understand growing things, to have that connection to life." "He will," Benjamin assured her. "We will teach him everything, about plants and cattle and horses and how to be a good man." "We should give him siblings too," Vivienne said, a bit shyly. "I do not want him to be lonely. I want this house full of life and noise and love." Benjamin felt his breath catch. The birth had been hard and he had been terrified throughout. The idea of going through it again was daunting. But looking at Samuel, thinking about more children, more love, more life, he found he wanted it too. "If you are willing," he said. "Then yes, I would like that very much." Vivienne leaned over the baby to kiss him. "I am willing, I am more than willing. This is what we are building, Benjamin. This is the harvest from all those seeds I planted. Family, home, love, everything growing together." Time moved forward in that particular way it does when you are happy, both too fast and just right. Samuel learned to crawl, then walk, then run. He followed his mother through the garden and his father around the ranch, absorbing everything with that sponge-like capability of small children. He learned to identify plants by sight and smell, learned the sounds different cattle made, learned to ride before he could properly form sentences. When Samuel was 2, Vivienne told Benjamin she was pregnant again. This time he was excited rather than terrified, confident in her strength and ability. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and the labor shorter. Their daughter was born on a spring morning with the windows open and birdsong flooding the room, and she came out pink and perfect and screaming. They named her Rose, for the flowers Vivienne had planted that first day, the ones that now climbed the porch and filled the air with perfume every summer. Rose Tucker, who had her mother's dark eyes and delicate features and would prove to have an iron will beneath her sweet appearance. Samuel was initially suspicious of his baby sister, but within days had decided she was acceptable, and within weeks was fiercely protective of her. Benjamin watched his son try to help with diaper changes and bottle feedings and felt pride swell in his chest. They were raising him right, teaching him to be gentle and responsible and caring. The ranch prospered, with the garden providing abundant food and Vivienne's knowledge of plants allowing them to make medicines and sell herbs to townspeople. They had more income than they needed. Benjamin hired more help, expanded the herd, bought more land. The house that had echoed with loneliness was now always full of sound, children laughing, Vivienne singing, ranch hands calling to each other, cattle lowing in the distance. When Rose was a year old, Vivienne announced she was pregnant again, and this time Benjamin laughed with pure joy. 3 children, a full house, exactly what they had talked about. Their third child, another boy they named Daniel, arrived in winter like Samuel had, but on a mild day with sun streaming through the windows. Daniel was smaller than his siblings had been but just as healthy, and he slipped into the family as though he had always been there. Benjamin was 40 years old now, with 3 children and a wife he loved more with each passing year. The grief for Sarah and his first daughter had not disappeared, but it had transformed into something softer, a gentle sadness rather than a consuming pain. He thought of them sometimes, especially on anniversaries, but he no longer felt guilty for being happy. Vivienne had been right. Love was not finite. The heart could hold both sorrow for what was lost and joy for what was found. One evening when Daniel was still an infant, Benjamin and Vivienne sat on the porch in the twilight, watching Samuel chase Rose around the yard while Daniel slept in Vivienne's arms. The garden stretched out before them, lush and abundant, and the valley beyond glowed in the last light of day. "Do you remember the day I found you in the garden?" Benjamin asked. Vivienne smiled. "Every detail. I was so scared, but also so desperate to do something that mattered, to plant something that would grow even if I did not survive. You planted more than you knew. You planted hope in me. You planted this whole life we have now. We planted it together. You gave me the space to grow. You gave me safety and love and room to be myself. I just added some flowers and vegetables to what you had already built." Benjamin shook his head. "No, I had built nothing. I had let everything die, including myself. You brought it all back to life. The garden, the ranch, me. I was lost, and you found me by tending the things I had abandoned." Vivienne leaned against him, careful of the baby. "Then we saved each other. You gave me freedom and home. I gave you hope and family. It was always meant to be both of us together, making something neither of us could have made alone." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play, and Benjamin thought about that frightened woman who had stopped mid-flight to plant lettuce seeds in a stranger's garden. Thought about how she had been planting roots without knowing it, roots that would grow into this huge, beautiful life. "I love you," he said, not for the first time, not for the 1,000th time, but with the same sincerity as always. "I will love you until the day I die and probably beyond that." "I love you too, and I am so grateful I wandered onto your land that day. So grateful you were brave enough to help a stranger. So grateful for every seed I planted and every one that grew." Samuel came running up to the porch then, breathless and grinning. "Papa, can we plant something new tomorrow? Mama showed me a flower in her book that she says would grow good here." Benjamin ruffled his son's hair. "We can plant whatever you and your mama think best. That is always the right answer." Vivienne laughed, and the sound carried across the valley like a promise, like hope made audible. And Benjamin Tucker, who had once been the loneliest man in California, who had closed himself off from life and love and future, looked at his family and his land and felt complete. The years continued their march. Samuel, Rose, and Daniel grew from children into young people, each with their own personality and passions. Samuel inherited his mother's love of plants and his father's sense of responsibility, becoming the kind of young man who could gentle a frightened horse and coax life from difficult soil with equal skill. Rose proved to be brilliant and stubborn, always asking questions, always pushing boundaries, always insisting on being included in everything her brothers did. Daniel was quieter, more contemplative, but with a deep well of creativity that expressed itself in carving and drawing and music. Benjamin and Vivienne watched them grow with the pride and occasional terror of all parents. There were illnesses survived, accidents narrowly avoided, arguments and makeups and lessons learned the hard way. But through it all, the foundation held. The family they had built together, based on love and respect, and the kind of trust that comes from choosing each other every day, remained strong. When Vivienne was 35, she told Benjamin she thought she might be pregnant again, though she was less certain this time as her cycles had become irregular. The doctor confirmed it, but also cautioned that pregnancies later in life carried more risk. Benjamin wanted to wrap her in cotton wool again, wanted to protect her from any possible harm, but Vivienne just laughed and told him she had birthed 3 healthy babies and knew her own body better than anyone. This 4th pregnancy was harder than the others. Vivienne was more tired, more uncomfortable, but she remained determined and optimistic, and when the baby came, another girl, she arrived healthy and screaming just like her siblings. They named her Grace, for the grace they felt at being given this unexpected gift so late. Grace grew up the darling of her older siblings, doted on and occasionally spoiled, but also taught by example to be strong and capable. Samuel was 16 by the time Grace was walking, Rose was 14, and Daniel was 12. They had all learned to work the ranch, to help with the garden, to contribute to the family in meaningful ways. And they had learned, more importantly, what love looked like in action. Benjamin was in his late 40s now, his hair graying at the temples, his body carrying the wear of hard work but still strong. Vivienne had fine lines around her eyes and threads of silver in her dark hair, but to Benjamin, she was as beautiful as the day he had found her in his garden. More beautiful, actually, because now her beauty was layered with years of shared life, with every moment of joy and struggle and growth. They celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary quietly, just the two of them sitting on the porch after the children were asleep, much like they had done countless times before. 15 years, Vivienne said wonderingly. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, sometimes it feels like forever. Good forever or bad forever, Benjamin teased. The best forever. The kind where I cannot quite remember what life was like before you, and I do not want to. The kind where I look at our children and our home and this garden, and I think that every hard thing I survived was worth it because it led me here. Benjamin took her hand, interlacing their fingers. I used to think I had one chance at happiness, and I lost it. That I would spend the rest of my life just existing, just getting through days. But you taught me that life keeps offering chances if you are brave enough to take them. That closing yourself off does not honor what you lost, that you can hold grief and joy at the same time. We taught each other, Vivienne corrected. You taught me that home is not just a place but people. That family is built through choice and love, not just blood, that I could trust again after everything that happened to me. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the night sounds, the distant cattle, the rustle of wind through the garden. I want to grow old with you, Benjamin said. I want to watch our children have children. I want to sit on this porch when we are 70 and still hold your hand like this. Then we will. That is the thing about planting roots, Benjamin. They keep you anchored even when storms come. And we have planted so many roots together in this soil and in each other that nothing could uproot us now. The promise in her words felt true in a bone-deep way. They had built something solid, something that would last. Over the next decade, Benjamin and Vivienne watched their older children begin to find their own paths. Samuel courted and married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property, a woman as capable and strong-willed as his mother. They built a house on the far edge of Benjamin's land and started their own herd, working in partnership with the family ranch. Within 2 years, they had given Benjamin and Vivienne their first grandchild, a boisterous boy named after Benjamin. Rose proved to have no interest in marriage, at least not yet. Instead, she wanted to study, to learn, to see more of the world than just Ukiah Valley. Benjamin supported her completely, sending her to San Francisco for school, writing letters constantly, worrying but also proud that his daughter had the courage to chase her own dreams. Daniel stayed close to home, finding his calling in craftsmanship. He built furniture that people came from 3 counties away to commission, working with wood in the way his mother worked with plants, understanding the grain and the growth rings, and how to coax beauty from raw material. And Grace grew up surrounded by all this love and example, becoming a child who saw magic in ordinary things, who collected seeds like treasure and kept meticulous journals of what she planted and when and how it grew. Benjamin was in his late 50s when the circuit preacher came through Ukiah and mentioned having met a woman in Hopland who asked after the Tucker family. The woman had been elderly, dying actually, but she had insisted on sending a message. She wanted the Vivienne who had escaped the Ashford household to know that she was sorry, that she had been wrong not to help when she could have, and that she was glad Vivienne had found freedom and happiness. Vivienne cried when Benjamin told her, not from pain but from the closure of it. That chapter of her life had been closed for decades, but somehow this final acknowledgement, this apology, even though it came far too late, mattered. I was so young, she said, wiping her eyes, so scared and alone. And I thought I would die in that house, would never see anything beyond washing and cooking and scrubbing for people who saw me as less than human. If someone had told me then that I would end up here, with you, with all of this, I would never have believed them. But you fought for it. You ran even though you were terrified. You stopped to plant seeds in a stranger's garden because you refused to let them take away your hope. That courage brought you here. And your courage kept me here. Your willingness to see me as a person worth saving. We were both brave, Benjamin. That is why it worked. They stood together in the garden, now 3 times the size it had been when Vivienne first arrived, bursting with late summer vegetables and flowers. Grace was at the far end, carefully harvesting tomatoes under her mother's earlier instruction. Daniel was in his workshop nearby, the sound of his tools creating a rhythm in the background. Samuel and his family were coming for dinner, as they did most Sundays. Rose was due home from San Francisco for a visit in 2 weeks. Everything they had planted had grown and flourished and continued to spread. "We did good," Benjamin said quietly. "We took our broken pieces and built something whole." Vivienne leaned into him, her head on his shoulder. "We did better than good. We created life and love and legacy. We turned loneliness into family. We turned a dying garden into this abundance. That is more than good. That is miraculous." Benjamin kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair and the herbs she had been working with. "You are my miracle. Everything else is just details." The seasons turned as they always did, and Benjamin and Vivienne settled into the comfortable rhythm of long marriage. They knew each other so thoroughly now that words were often unnecessary. A look could convey understanding. A touch could offer comfort or invitation. They had learned each other's bodies and minds and hearts so completely that they moved through life as a unit, separate but joined, individual but together. When Benjamin turned 60, Vivienne organized a celebration that brought everyone together. Samuel and his growing family, Rose home from San Francisco, where she now worked as a teacher. Daniel with his latest furniture pieces displayed like art. Grace, newly 18, and talking about studying agriculture at the state college. They ate and drank and told stories, and Benjamin looked around his full house and could hardly reconcile this abundance with the lonely man he had been 20 years ago. That night, after everyone had left or gone to bed, he and Vivienne sat on their porch in the summer darkness. "Thank you," he said. "For what? The party, for everything. For stopping in my garden that day. For planting seeds everywhere you went. For loving me when I had forgotten how to love myself. For giving me this life, this family, this joy. For being the bravest person I have ever known." Vivienne was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke her voice was thick with emotion. "I should be thanking you. You saved my life, literally and figuratively. You gave me freedom and home and children and partnership. You saw me as a whole person when most of the world saw me as property or less than. You loved me with your whole heart. How could I not flourish under that care? How could I not grow into my best self? We did it together. Neither of us could have done this alone. No. But together we were unstoppable. Together we took 2 damaged people and built something beautiful. And Benjamin, I would do it all again. Every hard moment, every scared second, if I knew it would lead me back to you." He pulled her close, and they sat wrapped in each other, and the night sounds and the scent of the garden that was her legacy and their shared joy. The years ahead were gentler. Benjamin and Vivienne slowed down, let the younger generation take on more of the heavy work. Samuel ran most of the ranch operations now, with Daniel helping in his spare time. Grace went off to college and came back with revolutionary ideas about crop rotation and soil management that she immediately began implementing. Rose visited often, bringing friends from San Francisco, filling the house with conversation and debate and new ideas, and the grandchildren kept coming. Samuel and his wife had 4 eventually. Rose surprised everyone by marrying at 32 to a fellow teacher and having twins within the first year. Daniel found love with a widow who had 2 children of her own, and they blended their families with grace and patience. Grace married young, to a farmer's son who shared her passion for the land, and their babies came quickly, one after another. Benjamin and Vivienne's house became the center of an ever-expanding family web. Sunday dinners grew to accommodate dozens of people. The garden expanded yet again, with Grace implementing her new techniques and teaching her siblings and cousins. The valley that had once seemed so empty to Benjamin was now full of people he loved, people who existed because he and Vivienne had found each other and chosen to build rather than retreat. When Benjamin was 70, his body finally beginning to show real wear, he had a health scare that reminded everyone of mortality. Nothing fatal, but enough to make him slow down, to make them all appreciate the time they had. Vivienne nursed him through recovery with the same patient competence she had shown in every other aspect of their life together. She made him herbal teas and healing poultices, monitored his rest and food, and sat with him for hours just talking or reading or being silent together. "I am not ready to lose you," she said one evening, her voice cracking. "You will not lose me, not yet. I am too stubborn and I have too much to live for. Promise me. Promise me we get more time." Benjamin took her hand. "I promise I will fight for every moment. I promise I will be here as long as I possibly can. Because, Vivienne, I am still not done loving you. I am still not done marveling at what we built. I need more time." He kept that promise, recovering fully and regaining most of his strength. They had 5 more years, 5 beautiful years of watching grandchildren grow, of sitting on the porch, of walking through the garden hand in hand, of quiet mornings and peaceful nights. Benjamin Tucker died in his sleep at 75, on a spring night with the windows open and the scent of roses filling the room. Vivienne woke at dawn and found him gone, his face peaceful, his hand still holding hers. She did not scream or wail. Instead, she pressed a kiss to his forehead and whispered thank you for 33 years of love. The funeral brought the whole valley together. Benjamin had been respected and liked, had earned his reputation as a fair man and good neighbor. But it was Vivienne's grief that moved people most. The way she stood straight and dignified through the service, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a testament to the life she and Benjamin had built. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, in a plot Vivienne had been tending for years, knowing eventually it would be needed. She planted roses around the grave immediately, the same wild roses she had transplanted that first summer. "So you will always have flowers," she told the fresh earth. "So you will always know you are loved." Vivienne lived another 10 years after Benjamin died, years she spent teaching her grandchildren everything her mother had taught her, passing down plant lore and stories and wisdom. She stayed in the house they had shared, kept the garden immaculate, and visited Benjamin's grave daily with fresh flowers. She never remarried, never sought another partner. When people asked why, she said simply that she had been blessed with the love of her life, and that was more than most people got. She was not lonely, surrounded as she was by family and purpose and memories. When Vivienne finally passed at 84, peacefully in her garden on a summer afternoon with her hands in the soil where they belonged, they buried her next to Benjamin on the hill. The whole valley mourned, recognizing that they had lost not just a woman but a force of nature, someone who had made everything around her bloom. At the funeral, Grace, now a grandmother herself, spoke about how her mother had taught them all that love and hope were things you planted deliberately, things that required tending and patience and faith, that beauty could grow even in the hardest soil if you were willing to work for it, that roots, once planted deep, would hold through any storm. The Tucker Ranch continued to thrive, passed down through generations who understood they were not just inheriting land but legacy. The garden remained the heart of it all, expanded and evolved but still containing some of those original plants from Vivienne's first desperate planting, still producing abundance, still teaching lessons about growth and hope, and the miracle of things that seem dead but are only dormant, waiting for the right hands to call them back to life. And on warm summer evenings, when the light slanted gold across the valley and the roses perfumed the air, people said you could sometimes see two figures walking hand in hand through the garden, though whether it was memory or something more, no one could say for sure. But it did not really matter. What mattered was the life they had lived, the love they had shared, the roots they had planted together that continued to sustain everyone who came after them. The story of Benjamin Tucker and Vivienne, of the lonely rancher who found her tending his garden, planting roots he did not know he wanted, became family legend. It was told to each new generation as proof that sometimes the best things in life come not when you seek them, but when you are brave enough to be found, when you are willing to let someone else see your neglected places and trust them to plant hope there, to bring life back to what had been dying. And in the end, that was the real miracle. Not that Benjamin had saved Vivienne or Vivienne had saved Benjamin, but that they had saved each other, and in doing so had created something that would outlast them both. A family, a home, a garden that bloomed year after year, testament to the truth that love, real love, plants roots that never stop growing, that continue to nourish and sustain long after the original gardeners are gone. The garden still stands, tended now by great-great-grandchildren who know the stories and honor the legacy. And sometimes, when they are planting or weeding or harvesting, they swear they can feel hands guiding theirs, teaching them still, reminding them that everything worth having begins with a single seed planted in good soil with faith and love and the willingness to wait for growth. That is the power of roots. That is the gift Benjamin and Vivienne gave to all who came after. That is the promise of a love story that began with a frightened woman planting seeds in a stranger's garden and grew into something that would nourish generations. It started with hope in the face of fear, with kindness when cruelty would have been easier, with two people choosing to build instead of destroy, to open instead of close, to love instead of hide. And really, when you think about it, that is the only story that ever mattered. Two people, a garden, and the choice to plant roots together, to grow something beautiful from broken pieces, to believe that the future could be better than the past if they were brave enough to tend it with care.